but that includes every person and every industry within our industry. So that includes coaches and vendors. That includes competitions. There's so many ways that we can go about raising funds for underprivileged dancers, and there's actually there's several nonprofits in the United States that actually do that. You know what I mean? But yeah, so what you pose is a very interesting question. Like, where do we go, and how do we, still make a living at it? And I think, that's the beauty specifically about being in an organization like the NDCA, is that, we have been, a lot of us have been able to afford a very nice life doing what we love based on how that structure is set up. You know what I mean? Yeah, there are other dance organizations, but the way that we're set up in the NDCA, in the pro-am industry, we are able to afford a decent life. Obviously, with Corona and quarantine, things have obviously changed and blown up in our face. But the reality is there are plenty of professions, and I say this honestly because if you've had a student who was a lawyer, right? They have a law firm, they have big clients, they make a lot of money, but they also do a good amount of pro bono work, right? We have a lot of professions that we have psychologists and psychiatrists who have take insurance, and then they charge a lot per hour or per 45-minute session, but they still have a small percentage of, and just think about that. If we as professionals cared enough and really sought out specific group or maybe a group of kids or whatever to do this pro bono work with, specifically ones that don't have normal access to it, I first learned that from one of my students had a tennis instructor who was the main pro that did lessons at her country club. And he made a lot of money. The club hired him, and then he did private lessons and all that stuff. He made a lot of money, off of people from this country club. But he also had a good amount of kids that he just, either taught really cheaply or taught for free. And so for me, when you know how beautiful and amazing this dance sport process and journey is for people, why wouldn't you want to share it in a very charitable way?
No, absolutely. Just thinking about that, my brain went to a couple of different places, which is we see a lot of outreach from professionals and from studios being in school systems or part of an after-school program, which is great and wonderful and does exactly, I think, what we're talking about here, which is reaching out the hand and saying, okay, we know you can't, we know that you are not going to spend $75 an hour per kid to do, an hour lesson. So let's do a summer camp or let's do an after-school program at way reduced price or even for free to get the kids into it. How do we then bridge the gap between, okay, we've ignited this interest in students that would otherwise not be able to be in the studio environment. We've got them hooked. We gave them a taste of what dance sport could be. To then, all right, now you want to go somewhere with it. It's $2,000 a comp. It's a $3,000 dress. It's $100 in spray tan hair and makeup, and you need $200 in shoes.
Woo, Sam, you preach it, honey. Preach.
Because ultimately, it's if we're doing the right thing and we're saying, okay, we notice that there's an issue in our community. We notice that we could be doing better and we want to do better. So we're going to do all the right things to set it up, but we don't create a middle ground to say, okay, we know you couldn't afford it here. You're definitely not going to be able to afford it over here, but we've now told you that this is achievable. Don't we have some responsibility on the part of either instructors or an organization or vendors to make that gap easier?
So clearly, everything is easier when instruction comes from the top, right? I'm not going to sit here and I will never ever you know, the world needs to change. We all need to progress. We all need to change. Great. I get it. Fantastic. Um, but there's a lot of ways to go about solving issues. You know, when you do grassroots from the bottom up, it's a lot more of an uphill battle and a struggle, but very effective. You know, it would be easier if things came from the top down, you know, setting up organizational funding, nonprofit work specifically for that transitional period that you're talking about. What's so fascinating about that transitional period is, yes, you're right. You've hit something that I've run into because I used to be a school teacher, so I had an after-school program of kids, mainly for ballroom etiquette. One of my dance mentors did it for 30 plus years, just kind of did it almost like a cotillion situation for kids, but in disparaged communities. So it's very near and dear to my heart. But how do you get, you're right, how do you get from this, we ignite them, and then all of a sudden we put them in this world of what do they do next with zero funds, right? So you're right. Part of this is, it's kind of like, it's similar to the pro bono work that I was talking about, that each professional, it would be nice if each professional kind of had a little percentage of this and did it, and then look at where the world would be. But that includes every person and every industry within our industry. So that includes coaches and vendors. That includes competitions. You know what I mean? I know competitions have a lesser dollar amount for kids to compete, which is, fine or whatever. But yeah, there has to be a heightened sensibility of everything in our industry, everybody in our industry. So obviously we've progressed, there's dress rentals and clothing rentals and cheaper shoe options, and we've progressed, and things will only get better like that. But, it's kind of like, I feel a lot of us, specifically like me, having school teacher experience, like, there are just times where you just got to buy your students pencils and notebooks because they can't afford it. You know what I mean? And their
Yep.
parents can't afford it. You just got to do that. And that's equally as wrong in our society as, these kids that we ignite and want to bring through. And then all of a sudden, their hopes and dreams are crushed because they can't really afford to do what so we as a society, as a dance sport society, it is important for us to take a hard look at ourselves, and really and acknowledge, there is a lot of good out there. Yes, it is progressing. It's just not there yet, and we need to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're not saying that we've done a terrible job up until this point. We are climbing that hill little by little by little, but we still got a long way to go. Yeah,
Oh my God,
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely.